Hello, everyone. My name is Jenny, and I am the coordinator for the Metro Phoenix EcoFlora project. Thank you for joining us. This session is being recorded. Please, everyone, remain muted until it's time for the question and answer session. Please feel free to type questions into the chat as we go along at any point. Everyone who's registered for this session will receive the recording in their email, and it'll also be on our YouTube channel. For those of you not familiar with the Metro Phoenix EcoFlora, got some people. Once again, please remain muted until we get to the Q&A. Thank you. In this EcoQuestions session, we hear from Greg Clark. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Metro Phoenix EcoFlora, we are a community science project that documents urban biodiversity. And we also still having some feedback. I apologize. We document urban biodiversity, and we also connect people with nature through technology, events, resources, and more. So each month we have a new EcoQuest, which is like a hide and seek game for different species. And this month we are focused on lovebirds. So we want to know more about where they're nesting, what plants they might be eating, and anything we may not have information on already. So like I said, today we have Greg Clark, the Burrowing Owl Habitat Coordinator for Wild at Heart. Greg has compiled and mapped Rosy-faced lovebird locality and population information in Metro Phoenix since 1999, and his website provided foundational support for studying their status and allowed others to collectively share information about them. Thanks to Greg, we have a great record of lovebird images, sounds, and information. Greg, thank you so much for being here, and welcome to EcoQuestions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll turn it over to you.
Now it's gone again.
Okay, I hope you can hear me okay. I think I'm unmuted. So thanks for the introduction. So I am the Burrowing Owl Habitat Coordinator for Wild at Heart. Most of the time when I'm on Zoom, I'm telling people about burrowing owls. So this is like a vacation for me. I get to talk about a different bird. It's my interest in lovebirds, specifically the rosy-faced lovebird, started while I was working on the Arizona Breeding Bird Atlas. So not sure if very many of you are familiar with the Atlas. It was a statewide bird survey that was done in the 90s. It took about 8 or 9 years to complete. And towards the end of that Atlas period, the research period, I discovered that lovebirds were in the valley, and I became concerned that we didn't know the distribution, we didn't know their breeding status, and we might not be able to determine that before the Atlas was published. There was a lot of concern that the lovebirds were not actually breeding in the valley because they have a long lifespan. They're pet releases, and so there wasn't a lot of interest in putting lovebirds into the Arizona Breeding Bird Atlas. So I tried to organize a project real fast, citizen science project, just like you guys are doing. And I was able to get enough research information in a short period of time so that justified this bird being added to the Breeding Bird Atlas. So if the Atlas ever comes your way, you'll see it in there. So that's a little bit about the background of how I got interested in it. It's also worth mentioning that I had a website with lots of information about Arizona birds, sound recordings, and photographs, but I was pretty proud of that. And then when I put the lovebird information on the website, that swamped everything. Whatever people went to for Arizona birds was nothing compared to the thousands of people that wanted to know all about parrots in Phoenix. So let's talk a little bit about the background of where the rosy-faced lovebird comes from. I may also slip and call it the peach-faced lovebird. That's the way we would have described it 20 years ago. But we're trying to move to what the world calls it. The world denomination is rosy-faced. But if you talk about peach-faced lovebirds, they still know what you're talking about. So my map here kind of is a little out of date. But from Angola through Namibia down to Southwest Africa, that's basically where the lovebird comes from. There are a lot of lovebirds in Africa. It's not just the rosy-faced, but they're geographically separated. So there's something like 7, 8 lovebirds. One of them's on Madagascar, right next to Africa. So they're all related, but they are distinct geographically. There's a lot of similarities between Phoenix and climate and Namibia. One of the best ways to look at this, the fate, long-term fate of rosy-faced lovebirds is that there are 2 population centers in the world. One is in Namibia, and the other one is in Phoenix. So this is how they make a living in Namibia. The main nest structure comes from the sociable weaver. Handsome bird, looks a little bit like a house sparrow that we have here in the US. They build huge nests that house many species besides the sociable weaver. Pretty cool. It's just like a big giant condo. A small falcon, I think it's called a pygmy falcon, lives in the nest along with a bunch of other birds, the sociable weaver and the lovebirds. This is like the #1 nest site for the rosy-faced lovebird in their range in Southwest Africa. Not the only location, but it's far and away, it's the #1 site. So guess what? They kind of like the same thing over here. So Namibia has a picture on the left, which is a power line. You can see the little insulators stuck up on top. That'll give you an idea how big that power pole is and the size of the nest. You know, these weavers build nests the size of cars. So in Phoenix, if you have an untrimmed palm tree, then you may be a popular host site for the lovebirds. Sometimes untrimmed palm trees also have our nest sites, but the untrimmed palm trees can hold huge numbers of lovebirds in a colony. Many years ago, a palm tree was topped. The whole tree came down in somebody's yard in East Mesa, and there were like 50 lovebirds and eggs, and it was just a catastrophe. The folks in the neighborhood all got together and rescued the eggs and the lovebirds and tried to make the best of a bad situation. But it's really an eye-opener for how dense these colonies can become. And they're really mimicking the same kind of colony nest structure that they have in their homeland in Africa. So, as I said, they really like the palm trees. But when I first started doing this work, I didn't know anything about the palm tree preference. I really thought it was a saguaro issue. I was pretty concerned about the lovebirds taking over cavities just like European starlings do. Cavities are a scarce resource, pretty much in the range of all birds and birds that nest in cavities. There are much fewer cavities than there are birds that want to use them. So anything that is introduced into a habitat, like the lovebirds or they're an introduced species, they're going to provide some competition. And saguaro cactus is a keystone species in the Sonoran Desert. So you have to be a little bit concerned when you see a parrot that's going to provide competition for woodpeckers, and there are flycatchers and just lots and lots of birds that want to use the saguaro cavity. The thing about a parrot is that they're, even the small ones are like flying can openers. Their beak can deliver a wound. And so if they want something and enough of them gang up on you, it could be bad for you. So my concern about the lovebird was, where are they? What impact are they going to have on native species? And are they going to break out? So that's why I was trying to figure out, where are all of these lovebirds staying? So basically, the palm tree is the winner, and saguaro cactus is in second place with these tile roofs and, cliff swallow nest buildings, all kinds of stuff. And these reports come into me on the website over about 20 years and filled in the gaps on where they're living, how they're making a living, what kind of nest sites they have, as well as behavioral things like they'll make trouble for Gila woodpeckers and other birds and kick them out. So they're part of the ecology in Phoenix now, but that is associated with the urban environment. We talk a little bit about their nesting behavior in detail. So there's only a couple of parrots in the world that can build their own nest. It's so unusual for a cavity nester to use existing cavities like other birds use, like the nest sites that are built like Gila woodpeckers and saguaro cactus, but they can also make do and make their own nest. So a citizen scientist sent me that fine photograph that you see of the nesting materials stuck into the rump feathers of the parrot. And that's how they transmit nest materials when they want to do it themselves from scratch, or they want to embellish an existing nest. So they have to figure out how to get the materials prepared, which means they have to have the right kind of materials. They're not a stick nester. The monk parakeet, also called a Quaker parrot, they build a stick nest, and which is also unique. They're the only parrot that builds a stick nest, and it probably limits the range and opportunities for the monk parakeet. But the lovebirds, they can build a nest anywhere. So there you see an untrimmed palm tree that's also being used by a lot of lovebirds, and the big tall palm tree in the photograph has nesting lovebirds and gives you some idea of what they prefer. They want to be way up in the air. They don't want to be down low at all. Higher is better. So here's some other examples to give you some idea about higher is better. There's a second story window. You can see these. I'll move my cursor over in case that helps you. There are a whole bunch of lovebirds up there under the eaves. So that is actually, there may only be one cavity there, but there's a lot of birds using it. So this is an additional idea on how, and the inset photo shows you how they can get inside the eaves and live in there. Gila woodpeckers will do the same thing. Gila woodpeckers will figure out a way to get inside your roof in the attic, and a whole bunch of woodpeckers can set up shop inside the same attic. And so here's one in a high rise. Pretty cool. This will give you some idea of how long it took for the lovebirds to fill in Phoenix. When I started, it was a pretty small number of sightings back in 1999, 2005, and the map on the left. And for a very long time, the lovebirds just would not cross I-17 and Highway 60. So if you can even see the line, if you look at the top photograph in the middle, if you do see my cursor, I'll show you how there's I-17 going up and down. It's kind of hard to see, but that basically was a line that they would not cross. Now there are some other sightings that are reported west of I-17. Sometimes those are just single sightings. Those are often pet releases. Not everything that's reported over a 20-year time span is a breeding bird or multiple birds, you know, like big colonies. Sometimes it really is just a pet release. And the pet releases do end up sometimes joining a flock, and that also includes parakeets, budgies. A number of different parrots can make a living if they hang out with the lovebirds. But mixed flocks are not that unusual. The little pink-colored locations that you see in these maps are where there's like 25 or more lovebirds at a location. So you get down to 2010, the bottom picture, and you can see that they've moved way past that original red line, which was sort of my original border for where the lovebirds were found in the valley. There are no more active maps online, and that's because of the way Google decided to charge for nonprofit maps. I was unwilling to give them a credit card in fear of getting 2,000 or 3,000 people that all come and want to see a lovebirds map. That's not crazy. That actually used to happen in the old days. But the maps are useful in that they also give you some idea of how these lovebirds were released. There are two big releases. So in the top map, you can see on the east side of the valley, big lump over there, big giant lump, Mesa to Apache Junction, and then North Phoenix, central to North Phoenix. That's the echo from the original release. There was a giant windstorm in Apache Junction, and a breeder that had 100 lovebirds in it had the aviary destroyed in the microburst. So that began the possibility of a reintroduction that actually takes, and that's the East Valley one. The other one was someone actually called me, and they were a private citizen. They had the aviary. They didn't want to maintain it anymore, so they opened the door and they let 100 lovebirds out. Called me out of the blue and explained to me what happened. There are also a few other people. That was back in the 80s. So there was a couple of them about the same time in the mid 80s. There are some other people who are sympathetic to trying to figure out how this all happened that called me and said that they had accidental releases of more than 10, 15, 20 lovebirds in the 90s. They were actually kind of relieved to find out that they weren't the cause of the big introduction. That probably just added to the flock. If you look down at the bottom one, Ahwatukee, that big giant spread down at the bottom, it took a long time before the lovebirds would cross Highway 60, but once they did, they found Ahwatukee, and they really, really like Ahwatukee. So if we look at some of the examples of flocks that people send me, this is not unusual. I have many, many photographs at lots of different locations where there are 20, 25, 30 lovebirds at a single location having a good time. They do need water. That's a key resource here in the valley, just as it is in Namibia. Just as an aside, Namibia, Angola, and Southwest Africa have had drought problems recently. Namibia has had a wet year in 2021, but there are wild animal, crop, urban water shortages, and birds, native birds in Namibia, they're being affected. It sounds crazy, but there are wild parrots that are extirpated from their native ranges that have ended up in urban areas and are doing well in an urban area, but they're gone from the wild. This could happen to lovebirds in Namibia. They could have either just have a terrible drought combined with water usage that just eliminates the water holes that they need in Namibia. It's possible. Phoenix could end up being the source population for wild lovebirds, and it's not out of the question. It's not going to happen right away, but it's not a crazy idea. So this is some of the things that people have told me over the years. Usually they have a feeder. They come in, they see them at the feeder. They're there at the same time every day. Then they fly away. Other people say they're there in their yard all the time. They're a continuous presence. And then they're just seasonal. They're gone. They say they must have migrated away. So if you look at each of these, it tells you a lot about how the lovebirds operate. They're basically in flocks and they communicate. They talk to each other about where they want to go, when they want to go, and what they want to eat and where it is. So they have a loop that they run. They have a loop for feeders, water, whatever it is that they know about that's a good food source. So they hit that hot spot and then they move on. So that's why people will see them at the same time every day. Sometimes people have them using their yard. They're at work, they don't even know the lovebirds are there for an hour and then they move on. So if they have those palm trees or saguaro, someplace that is a nest site, it's actually a nest root site, the lovebirds are there all the time. So sometimes one group of lovebirds will leave and they'll go feed, they'll run their loop. Some lovebirds will stay, maybe they're protecting the nest site. They're very cooperative about protecting resources, and they also have to go out and eat. So some people have them all the time, and they don't understand the idea that people report them coming and going because they're always there. And then the lovebirds have migrated away is not true. They're not migratory in any sense, but their predators are. So when people lose lovebirds that they're used to having around, it's because the Cooper's hawks have come back to their neighborhood. The great horned owl is finished nesting and they come back. And so there is a seasonal time clock that's very regular. So people that have them over the years see them moving. They always move at the same time, come back at the same time. So they think it's migration, but it really has nothing to do with migratory habits of the lovebirds. It's all about the predators. They're on the menu for all the big predators, so they have to use the resources of the flock to tell them that the bad guys are after them, and they need to get to cover. So a few things you can learn about looking at the lovebirds. I like this picture because it shows you the relative size between a hummingbird and a lovebird. So the juveniles have this black on their beak. A lot of times people think that there's something wrong with the lovebird, but this is basically just a young lovebird. There are uncountable thousands of lovebirds in the valley. We don't have a complete census. Any work that you have done will be giving you a pretty good idea, actually, if you could figure out the percentage of land that's covered in the greater Phoenix area and how many lovebirds you spotted. You can do the math and try to get a rough estimate on how many lovebirds are here. It's a lot, and it's continuing to expand. So they'll eat pretty much the same food that people eat, except we usually don't eat out of feeders, but boy, they will. So they lovebirds that have feeders and have irrigated lawns, that's the upscale habitat. They got everything they're looking for. People want the lovebirds to stay and be happy, then they give them all this other junk food stuff. And so that increases the flock size and increases the probability that they'll have a nest site nearby. They love sunflowers. If people have grown sunflowers, they're proud of their big giant sunflower fence against their wall or their backyard. A flock of lovebirds will come in and clean them out in a day. I've had people tell me they have hundreds of blossoms and they're gone in a day. It's just amazing, the capacity of a lovebird flock to eat every seed on giant sunflower heads. So the other non-native foods are pods on ornamental trees. There are lots of those in Phoenix. We have a wide variety of seed-bearing pods of non-native plants. Palm tree dates, they like the palm tree dates. Berries, there are all kinds of berries, just like you see that lovebird eating the berries there. So you don't have to wonder about whether they eat them. We got hard data from people sending us pictures showing that they like the ornamental trees. So we get to the meat of the argument here for what's going to happen over the long term. It's still something I would like to continue to follow to see how the lovebirds are doing. So there is an abundance of mesquite pods, palo verde pods, and the kicker here really is the creosote seeds. If you're an animal that can eat a creosote seed, then you have an infinite food supply available to you. I am astonished that anything can eat a creosote seed. They are a foul-smelling, sticky plant designed to survive in the desert under the harshest environmental conditions and thrive, even though there are very few things that can wipe out creosote. So I've had a number of people send me pictures of the lovebirds eating the creosote seed. Creosote is the #1 plant in Arizona. So if conditions change in some way for them, if they figure out a way to adapt over long periods of time, they can actually become a dry adapted bird and move into the desert. So here are some of the kind of mixed pictures that you see. The lovebirds have mutations. Some of them are, they're all kinds of different colors. The Lutino ones tend to be yellow. And here are examples of several different mutations and a mixed flock with the budgies, the parakeets down there on the seed block. And so lots of different parrots, small parrots, can hang out with lovebirds and make a living. If parakeets could adapt to the desert, we have millions of them. They've been here for 100 years, and we don't have any wild budgies in Phoenix. So that'll tell you something about how well peach-faced lovebirds, the rosy-faced lovebird, is adapted to the climate that we have here in Phoenix. All they need is just a little edge on water and figure out food. And this is lovebird heaven here. Lovebirds are found in lots and lots of different cities and environments, but not in the numbers in Phoenix and not breeding. So it's the breeding aspect that really separates Phoenix from the other areas where there are pet releases. Some more photographs. You'll see some of the other, one of the other lovebirds here. So Fisher's is not geographically found in the same place as the rosy-faced lovebirds, different part of Africa. But once again, it's a lovebird. So if it can hang out with the other lovebirds, it can survive, make a living, hang around. Whereas normally, Phoenix is too tough for parrots, small parrots. There are some bigger parrots that can live longer, be more resourceful. Phoenix, just like Orange County, California, we have lots of different wild parrots living here, but not in the numbers like the lovebirds. So more photos. The blue mutation, the blue Curdy, Dutch blue, white-faced. They come in lots of different names and combinations. One of my favorites, Fountain Hills. So it's nice to read your newspaper in the morning with your friend. So this leads us into a little bit of extension of natural history into the future. This is like Greg's idea of what could possibly happen. It may never happen, but this is an example of how I think about habitat. Since I'm a bird guy, how could the lovebirds make a living long term away from urban areas, away from the assistance they get from people? Sort of like what they have in Namibia, which is some kind of perennial water source spread around where they can fly around in flocks, find food, and also find water. So basically, the Verde River is an opportunity for them. They can go from Fountain Hills, which is really close to the Verde River. I mean, it's right there. There are people feeding them in Fountain Hills, and it won't take very long for them to figure out a way to move into Fort McDowell, go back and forth and from the river to Fort McDowell, Fountain Hills, and over a long period of time, they'll start using the habitat for saguaro and also the palm trees that are there on the river. And they may actually start moving north and get up to where it's easier living. It's lower temperature, more water. So that's something that could happen in the future. Probably a long time from now, but nevertheless, it's something to think about. So when you see this, it's always important to know that it's the end. I think we're ready for questions now.
Thank you, Greg. We don't have any questions in the chat just yet. Everyone, please feel free to type in questions, or you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. We do have a couple of comments. We do have a question come in. One comment, saw one this morning flying and hopping around mesquite trees with a grackle seeming to be chasing it. Is this common?
Yeah, so the feeders that people have in their backyard, they'll drop seeds into the grass. And a lot of birds really just want to go down and get in the grass and eat the seeds. And the parrots like to do that too. So there's fights will break out between the native species and the lovebirds. So grackles being chased by parrots or the other way around. And that's also true for gambels, quail, threshers. White-winged doves will go every bird for himself. Good question.
Let's see, do they have a natural predator here?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that they're natural predators because there aren't any predators from Africa that have been introduced over here, other than, of course, everybody has a competitor with the European starling is not so much a predator, just a competitor. But the Cooper's hawk, all of the big hawks, red-tailed hawk, so forth, and great horned owl. Those are all the top predators. The biggest risks to them is not just a big bird catching them and eating them, it's also poison. So the people that use poison in their yards for their enjoyment of their garden and to have a greener grass and all that stuff, that could kill the whole colony of lovebirds. So, you know, we have a problem at Wild at Heart. One of the big problems is rodenticides like decon. So if people want to take decon and put them in their house to catch a mouse in their house, that's sort of what that product is for, instead of using it. Maybe they can't catch them with a trap, but then they take the decon and they put it outside. Then that kills everything, and birds that eat dead mice then catch the poison. And it's just terrible, especially for burrowing owls, the main species that I work with. It can get wiped out an entire town by people putting out mice during wet years. Same thing happens to lovebirds. People decide that they need to poison things in their yard, and that will kill, I think, kill 100, 200 lovebirds at a time before the poison. Okay. On that happy note.
Thank you. Sorry, your sound's breaking up just a little bit. So we've got a little bit of a delay. The next question is, Bird Store said 80% of them carry disease and not to feed them. What are your thoughts?
Well, there are parrots that do carry diseases, but you have to separate those out from the diseases that wild birds would carry. And so one of the concerns that people always have about parrots is that human beings can also have concern about that. But to give you an example of how this plays out, is West Nile is probably the best example of a disease that people catch, birds catch. Burrowing owls can catch it by getting it from a mosquito. So it's possible to catch diseases from a parrot, but as a vector, it's very inefficient. You would have to really work hard to catch a parrot and decide that the disease came from that.
Greg, are you still with us? I think we're losing sound from you. All right, everyone. It looks like we've lost Greg. Looks like he's dropped off. We'll give it just a minute or two and see if he pops back in. In the meantime, I'm going to go through the questions and see if I can answer anything myself in what I've researched of Greg's work, as well as Arizona field ornithologists. Let's see. I can't answer this one. I may have missed this. How did the original release occur? So there were two different aviaries, one in Apache Junction and one in the North Valley. The one in Apache Junction suffered damage during a storm and they were let out that way. Supposedly the one in the North Valley, they released because they simply, I guess, didn't want them anymore. So that was two big releases that started the population here in Metro Phoenix. And touching on the carrying disease, like Greg was saying, you know, it's hard to attribute it, but there is some study to see that there is disease in lovebirds that can impact native birds as well. I don't know what those percentages are. If you go to our EcoQuest journal post, there is a link in there to an article about this exact thing. Tom, I'm going to have to ask Greg about this one for the status and predictions for Tucson. So hopefully he pops back in. Let's see. Why do flocks come daily and then miss a day, or you see less some days? I think Greg touched on that a little bit of just food availability, and if there's a predator around and they sense that, they will leave and then come back. We can ask that if he pops back in. So let's see, Linda said, thanks for showing that photo of the lovebird with materials tucked in its feathers. That explains why a recent visitor had a long tail of plant material sticking out. Yes, they're very funny. They will tuck things into their feathers. They'll shred paper and things like that and carry it to make nesting materials. Let's see. Someone on our Lovebird Facebook group reported that the lovebirds eat goats' head burrs in their yard. Is this a known thing? Again, we'll ask Greg if he pops back in, but I personally haven't seen any observations of that happening. If that person could get a photo, that would be great. So we have that evidence for it. Next question, why do they come less often in March through May? That's a good question. Not sure about that one. Is it possible they eat fruits that are fermented and sort of get them drunk or even kill them? That's definitely a question for Greg. I haven't heard of that. Transmission to parrot, we just talked about that a little bit. It can happen also to native birds. Do they tell each other where the food is? Yes, earlier in the presentation, Greg mentioned that they do kind of chat about that and talk about where they can find food sources, also possibly water. So thank you everyone for your patience. I don't see Greg popping back in. I'll check my email really quick. Does anyone want to unmute and ask a question verbally or have a discussion? Do babies build nests near parent bird? Yes, yeah, they stick together. They're very social and definitely stick together. So I just got an email from Greg. He's lost his internet. So I'm so sorry, everyone. I'll save this chat, and everyone that's registered for the meeting, I'll try to get your questions answered and send it out with the email of the recording. One last question here. What is the estimated total bird population, lovebird population in Metro Phoenix? Right now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's between 2,000 and 3,000. Which we could do another survey and find out that there's actually more. But right now, yeah, it's about 2,000 to 3,000. So that's all we have. Like I said, I'll try to get that information to you all and talk with Greg and get your questions answered. I'm going to place a link in the chat to the organization that Greg works for, Wild at Heart Raptors, so you can check that out. I'll also be placing a link to our website for the Metro Phoenix EcoFlora, and then a link to sign up for our newsletter. Hang on one second. Chat's changing, there we go. So that link that I just sent is for our newsletter. And if you don't do anything else with the project today, I really encourage you to sign up for our monthly newsletter. All of these events like our EcoQuestions, bird walks, moth lightings, you'll find all of that information in there, as well as our new EcoQuests. I'll also put my email in the chat. So if you have any questions, you can message me. And again, my name is Jenny. I'm the coordinator for the project. And I think that's about it. You can also follow us on social at EcoFloraPHX, and I'll drop that into the chat. And we have a question, Kim, can we have Greg speak to us more about burrowing owls? I would really love that. And we actually got to chat for a little bit when I was talking to him about this EcoQuestion session. Very, very interesting stuff. So I would like to have that happen, even if it's not, lined up with the EcoQuest, but definitely. So that's it. Like I said, follow us on social. We're posting about all things urban biodiversity, especially for EcoQuest themes and our overall project. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Greg while we could, and that you enjoy the rest of this Wednesday. Take care.